Hi, my name is Lisa from the blog Farmhouse on Boone, where I like to write about food from scratch, natural living, and a handmade home. So I have a post on my blog about making homemade pickles, the easiest way to make homemade pickles. So today I want to show you in video form how to do it. It's very simple. This tutorial won't last long. So if you have a garden that is just overflowing with cucumbers, you don't know what to do with all of them, this is a great tutorial for you. Okay, I'm just going to begin by slicing my cucumbers in about 1/2 inch rounds. So about like this. If they're much thinner, they could get really soggy, and if they're much thicker, they won't ferment quite as nicely. So we are making fermented pickles, so not refrigerator pickles or canned pickles. These have health benefits of fermented foods. And essentially, to make fermented foods, all you need is salt and some kind of brine. So I have a tutorial on YouTube and my blog, which I will link in the description, that shows how to make homemade sauerkraut. And the only ingredients in that is salt and cabbage. And the reason for that is salt prevents bad bacteria from growing, which allows all of the natural bacteria that's present on vegetables to take over throughout the ferment, so that there is good bacteria and the bad bacteria stays at bay. So the keys with fermenting food at home is to keep the vegetables submerged below a brine. Brine will keep the vegetable without oxygen, and when there's no oxygen, mold cannot form. The salt prevents bad bacteria from growing. So it's the same reason why they used to preserve meat with salt back in the day before refrigerators. So I also have going on my stove just a little bit of water. That's going to be the water that we dissolve the salt in, and then I'll show you the rest of the process. Okay, so let's talk a minute about salt. I have pink Himalayan sea salt here. Any sea salt will do fine. Just don't try to use iodized table salt. That isn't beneficial for your health. It isn't beneficial for the bacteria present in the cucumbers, so it won't make a very good ferment. So, one thing to remember with little critters called probiotics is they don't like extreme heat. So I'm not gonna use a whole lot of water. I'm just going to use enough to dissolve my salt in. So I wanted to dissolve 4 tablespoons of sea salt, and I'm going to use just a small amount of hot water to do that. I'm running low on salt here. I'm going to have to order some more on Amazon, because that is it. Now the first couple times I made this, I made it with 5 tablespoons salt. And everyone in my family said it was a little bit too salty. So I've cut it down to 4. Some still think it's a little salty. You could get away with a little bit less. Now you don't want the salt ratio to be too low, because then bad bacteria could grow. And that's not what we want. So once this is good and dissolved, I'm gonna take my jar. I'm gonna pack it with the cucumbers, the sliced about 1/2 inch thick. Be approximately 5 medium cucumbers to fill up a 1/2 gallon mason jar. You want it full. It can't be too stuffed in. That's about as much as I'm going to be able to get in this jar. And then I'm going to fill it with water. And then I want to add my salt water. I want to make sure to be able to fit all of it in there, so I'm not going to fill this the rest of the way until this is cooled. I really don't want to heat my cucumbers. I want to keep this a nice raw ferment. If there's anything good bacteria alive on these farm fresh, locally grown cucumbers, I don't want to destroy it. I'm going to let this cool a minute. Then I'm going to pour it on and then add the rest of my water, cap it, and let it sit for about 5 days. That's it. It's cucumbers, salt, and water, which is essentially how the sauerkraut went. A brine, which the cabbage makes its own brine. It sweats and makes its own brine, so it was cabbage and salt. This is cucumber, salt, and water. You can ferment any vegetables this way. You can add peppercorns, you can add dill, fresh herbs of any kind to flavor these and make them delicious. My kids, my family, my husband, they all prefer the plain, mostly just the kids. So I just do salt, water, and cucumbers. In 5 days, they'll be sour, they'll taste like pickles, they'll be nice and fermented. I also want to add, and I talked about this in my sauerkraut tutorial, my weight. So I like to use a rock. I have a couple of these that I just have had for years, and I keep them in my kitchen, and I place them inside of a Ziploc bag just to contain any rock. I don't know what could be on rocks, but I don't know anything corrupting this good bacteria. And once the water's all in there, I'm just gonna put this on top of the cucumbers to make sure that it's submerged below the brine the entire time it's fermenting. I'm gonna grab a lid and place it loosely on. They also make fermenting lids, which mine are all in use right now. So the fermenting lids allow gas to escape. They're made of silicone, they have a little hole, and they allow the gases to escape. Instead of that, since mine are all in use in other ferments, I'm going to just put this on loosely so anything could just kind of escape if it needed to. So after this cools, I'm gonna add it, and then I will show you what we have. Okay, so after this salt water is nice and cool, we're just gonna pour it over the cucumbers. Hopefully you can fit it all in. If you can't, that's okay too. Just wanna be sure there's approximately 4 tablespoons of salt in here. Gonna cover it loosely and just allow the bacteria present in these cucumbers to do their magic. I'm just gonna set it right here next to my sauerkraut. I'm not gonna let this sit as long because they have a tendency to get soggy. I can let sauerkraut sit for 4 weeks or more. I'm gonna let this sit for about 5 days and we'll have delicious, crunchy, sour pickles. It's one of the only fermented foods my kids actually get excited about eating, so that's a win for me. Oh, forgot to put the weight on, although my jar is pretty full. It doesn't look like I'm gonna need it, but I will just set the weight right here on the counter so that if I lose any liquid or if I see any cucumbers peeking above the brine, I'll just go ahead and put that weight on there so that I can prevent that from happening. Right now, they seem to be pretty well submerged, so that's good. And check out the blog post I did on making these homemade pickles. I'll have it linked in the description if you want a printable recipe, more details, some links to the salt I use, things like that. That's how you make homemade pickles. Subscribe to my channel here on YouTube, Farmhouse on Boone, for more food from scratch, natural living in a handmade home.